when is Shavuot?
The hottest campfire we have all year.
Yes, it is. Campfire, we got marshmallows.
Fireworks.
We got fireworks, sparklers. We got sparklers. We got sunset. We got some music. But what is it? What do we celebrate? Giving of the Torah. Okay. What is the Torah? That's another way to think of the Torah. What is another word for the Torah? How do we translate Torah typically in English? Law, right? So it's great. So it's the giving of the law. So great. Here we have this day where we celebrate the giving of the law. How fun does that sound? I mean, doesn't every parent, come home and their kids say, "Can we celebrate the rules today? That sounds great. Let's celebrate it again. And we added some new ones this year. Let's celebrate the new rules." I mean, who thinks that's a fun celebration? Does anybody? Not really anybody. It's not really that inspiring to even think of it that way, is it? Like, oh, we're going to celebrate Law Day, Rules Day. So as I was thinking about this, I wanted to do some research because we've talked on this a long time, but I wanted to go in a different direction because we've talked about the benefits of the Torah, we've talked about what the Torah is, we've gone all these different directions, but I don't think we've ever talked about this thing that I want to talk about. And it's this idea that maybe what's happening here in this celebration that we're going to celebrate next week is less about rules and laws and more about a dichotomy. What's a dichotomy? Anybody? What's a dichotomy?
Something that doesn't make sense.
Something close. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but kind of for a different reason, though. Anybody ever know what a dichotomy is? Look it up in the dictionary. Wes, you got it?
Something opposite.
Something that's opposite. Good. So I have Webster's dictionary out of order. Maybe this is can't remember which one. Dichotomy, a division or a contrast between two things that are represented as being opposed or entirely different. So maybe Law Day is less about law, maybe it's something that's being compared to something that's shouldn't be entirely the same or should be different. So as I was thinking about this, we have several passages that I want to go through today, and I'll try to make them quick, but I want to focus and highlight on a few specific things. So we're going to start in our favorite book of all of the Torah, which is what? Leviticus. My wife said that was such joy. Leviticus 23, let's go there. Leviticus 23 is the book of the chapter in the Torah that talks about what we talk about often, this idea of rhythm. This rhythm of life, whether it be Wes was playing Beethoven a few minutes ago, there's a rhythm to this song. There's a rhythm to the songs that we play with the blessing when it's live. There's a rhythm to all of this thing when we play music, but there's also a rhythm to life. And it's this chapter that we talk about this rhythm often, of what this rhythm of life is. And so, somebody read for me Leviticus 23, 15 and 16. Mr. Aaron, can you see that there?
You shall count 7 full weeks from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. You shall count 50 days to the day after the 7th Sabbath. Then you shall present a grain offering of new grain to the Lord.
Right. You shall present a grain offering. How many weeks? 7 weeks? 7 weeks from what? Okay. We'll come back to that. And then it has this grain offering. I don't know if Walt's not here, otherwise he would probably say this. But his argument is the Shavuot is about a grain offering, so it's about a harvest thing. And all ancient cultures had this celebration, this worship in the spring for the harvest. So anytime ancient Near Eastern cultures would get together, they would have a harvest, and the moment they would have a harvest, they would celebrate for the gods. And as he would say, like, this is just like the other cultures, they would celebrate to their gods, but they're celebrating to this God. And so that's something that he and I have debated for quite a while. And going back to the question that I asked you, to understand, like, okay, 7 weeks from what? If we just started and read this passage, we'd be like, okay, 7 weeks from what? So back up a little bit and read 23:10. So we get a little bit more context of this. 23:10.
Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest.
Is that 23:10? Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That is 23:10. I wanted you to go back a little bit further, but just before 23:10 is what happens, what celebration takes place before Shavuot? Passover, right? So in the Passover story in 23, we'll go deeper in a minute, but in the Passover story, chapter 23, it talks about this idea when after the first day of Passover, because Passover is how many days? Remember? 7 days, right? So after the first day of Passover, how many of the 7 days is a Sabbath?
How many of them?
And the Passover days are considered a Sabbath. I think they're all 7 days are Sabbath because it's one Sabbath holiday, right? So it says on the second Sabbath, right, you are to do this. Start counting the Omer on the second Sabbath, the day after the first Sabbath. And then what you read is that you're supposed to count 7 weeks. And actually in Hebrew it's basically 7 Sabbaths. But the point that I wanted you to read it again, 23:10.
You sure, Tim?
23:10, yes.
Speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I give you and reap its harvest, you shall bring the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest.
Great. So sheaf there. Does anybody know what the word in Hebrew is for sheaf? Can we translate? Okay, so we just said it a few minutes ago. So this is where it's difficult sometimes. We don't see these words, right? Sheaf in English is the Hebrew word for omer, right? And what are we supposed to count? We're supposed to count the omer, 49 days from the omer. We're supposed to count these 7 weeks. As soon as we take this one omer, we're supposed to count these days. And so, the weeks is 7 weeks or 7 Sabbaths. And there seems to be, if you continue in 23:10, it says, and he shall wave the sheep, the omer, before Jehovah for your acceptance, and the morrow after the Sabbath, and the priest waves it. And on that day, when you wave the sheep, you shall prepare the male lamb, and prepare a perfect one, ascending to the yoke. And so there's this idea, on this day, we're supposed to count this sheaf, this omer, and we're supposed to prepare it. And it's all in connection with the Sabbath. So there's something to do with this Sabbath. And how many times in chapter 23 does it say sheaf, omer? 3 times. And so we've talked about this idea of something's repeated several times. There's a connection there. And the connection that we find here has to do with the Sabbath. And I'm getting way off track, but let's keep going. What is an omer? Does anybody know what an omer is? Let's look this up. What's an omer? If we read this, we read these words in the Bible, we have no idea what they mean. What?
1.5 bushels.
What?
1.5 bushels, I don't know.
Close, right? It's actually 1/10 of an ephah.
What is that?
Close, right? It's a measurement, right? Omer. Go ahead.
Measurement
is a measurement of grain. It's a measurement of this thing that you're picking. And when was the very first time that we hear about this? We just heard about it in Leviticus, but this word omer is a very rare word. It's only used a couple times in all of the Torah, right? On 2 stories, where we read it here in Leviticus, and then you find it in one other place in the Bible. Where would we read omer?
Abel? No?
Close. Not you're Genesis. You're thinking Genesis, right? Because everything goes back to Genesis, but this does not go back to Genesis. It goes back after that. We only find this in one other story in the Torah, and it is Exodus 16. Yes. Exodus 16 is the story that takes place between the Passover and Shavuot. It's this time where the Israelites are in the desert, where they're walking, they're traveling, traversing through the desert, and they're trying to figure out, this idea that they just got rescued. And so here you have this time frame in between these 2 things, and it's 49 days in the desert. They're walking to an unknown mountain for an unknown purpose. Have you thought about that before? God rescues them and he sends them out to the desert, he sends them in this direction. They don't necessarily know where they're going yet, or they don't know what they're going there for yet either. Could you imagine? Like here we have this idea, like what would that feel like? God says, this is where I want you to go. Then what? Do you ever have this feeling inside that God wants me to do this? But why am I doing this? And where am I going to end up? Frequently. So let's turn to Exodus 16, verses 1 through 3. Jacob, Exodus 1, Exodus 16, 1 through 3.
They journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, they departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the children of Israel said to them, "Oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into the wilderness to die as a whole assembly with hunger."
How many of us have short-term memory when it comes to what God has done in our lives? How many of us become fixated on all of the bad things that seem to be happening around us, and we can't even really see that there's good things that are happening as well? Maybe we forget what God just did for me yesterday, because all I can see is the bad. Sometimes we get mad at the Israelites, like, oh, they just experienced this great thing, these magnificent things that just happened in Egypt, and they just walked this water, and now they're complaining. But isn't that us as well? Don't we do the same exact things? We pray for something, God seems to do something in our lives that was unexpected, and the next day we're complaining again. Continue on, verse 4, please. Jake?
And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a certain quantity quota every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not."
Why does he rain down manna? Why does he send them down? Right? I mean, later on in the story, it talks about how he said that because he heard their grumbling, he heard that they were in need. But the very first thing that we hear after they grumble is God hears them and he says, "I'm going to test them." Test them for what? Test them to see, am I worthy? Am I worthy to be a follower of you? Am I worthy? Is that what God is really doing? It's like, I'm going to test you to see if you're actually worthy of following me. Is that what this is all about? So what is this test? Let's think about this. It continues on in 15 through 27. Now this is a long passage, and we don't have to go through it. If you know the story, God gives them the manna, and he asks a few things. I'll read this. I'll read a few of these passages. "And the children of Israel saw, and they said to each other, 'What is it?' In English, it's 'what is it?' In Hebrew, that's the Hebrew word manna. That's what manna means. What is it? Do you ever know that? Manna means, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moshe said to them, 'It is the bread which Jehovah has given you to eat. This is the word which Jehovah has commanded. Let every man gather according to each one's needs, an omer for each bean, according to the number of beans. Let every man take for those who are in his tent.' And the children of Israel did so and gathered, some more, some less. And they measured it by omers. And he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Each one gathered according to his need. And Moshe said, 'Let no one leave any of it until morning.' And they did not listen to Moshe. So some of them left part of it until morning. And it bred worms and stank. And Moshe was wroth with them. And they gathered it every morning, each according to his need. And when the sun became hot, it melted. And it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, two omers of each one. And all the rulers of the congregation came and told Moshe. And he said to them, 'This is what Jehovah said. Tomorrow is a rest, a Sabbath set apart for Jehovah. That which you bake, bake. And that which you cook, cook. And lay up the rest for yourselves and left over to keep until the morning. And they laid it up until the morning, so Moshe commanded, and it did not stink, and no worm was in it. And Moshe said, eat it today, for today is the Sabbath to Jehovah. Today you do not find it in the field. Gather it 6 days, but on the 7th day, which is a Sabbath, there is none. And it came to be that some of those people went out on the 7th day to gather, but they found none. So what are the rules? There's 3 rules here. What are the rules for gathering manna? What's the first rule?
Gather as much as you need.
Gather as much as you need, but it's not as much as you need. There's a limit to how much you can gather. How much was it? An omer! An omer! But the interesting thing about the omer was what? Some gathered much and some gathered less. But somehow, you all had an omer. Okay? This is interesting. So everybody was supposed to gather 1 omer. What happened? Okay, so that's lesson number 1. Rule number 1. Rule number 2 is what? What's the second rule?
No leftovers.
Don't save it for tomorrow. Because what happens?
Gets worms.
The next day, if you save it for tomorrow, it gets worms and it stinks, right? Your tent stinks. You can imagine my wife would be like, oh, get rid of this stuff, right? It's terrible. And there's like maggots, and it says like just gross stuff, right? Disgusting stuff. So don't leave it in overnight. Number 3 was what? This was the easy one. What's the third rule?
Don't gather on the Sabbath.
Still get it on Sabbath, right? Because what happens if you try to?
There.
It's not there, right? There's nothing there to even gather. There's none. So we have the Sabbath. That's early. We have the Sabbath connected to the omer. Once again, we have the Sabbath connected to the omer, which is also connected to what? The manna. So as I was looking at this, I was wondering, could it be that the manna that is in the story is actually part of the reason why we celebrate Shavuot? Is Shavuot less about law and rules and more maybe about manna? Let's keep going. Think about the test for a minute. What kind of test is this really? Everyone grabs what they want, but it all miraculously seems to be the same amount. You're not supposed to leave any, but if you do leave any, there's a natural consequence. You can't eat it the next day. And if you want to pick some up on Saturday when you're not supposed to on Shabbat, it's not there. Have any of you gone bowling before? Bowling. Have you ever gone bowling with kids and they put the bumper rails up? Right? And they throw the things down there, like maybe it's a 3-year-old, maybe it's an 18-year-old, they have like bumper rails up. What happens when they bowl? Never makes it into the gutter. Right? It's this, the bumpers are there so that these little kids can figure out, okay, this is what I do with the ball, this is how I roll it down, and it's got to go in a straight line, and it gives me a chance to practice and practice over and over until I finally get the point or get the handle like, oh, this is how you do it. So that when I get it, the bumper rails come up, and now I'm prepared. Now I'm actually prepared to play a real game. Because that's not a real game, that's a bumper game, right? So, but when you grow up, you want to play the real game. But you got to be prepared to be the real game. Right? So maybe this test that God is giving them isn't necessarily a test like, when I think of tests, I think of birds when the chicks get older, what does the bird do? Right? Kicks them out, right? And that's an easy test, right? You fly or you die, right? So these are 2 different tests here. One test is like, either you're going to make it or you're not going to make it, kid. The other test is, I want to prepare you, and I'm going to give you these little tests so that you are ready, so that you're prepared, so that you can actually do something with what I'm about to give you. Maybe this test maybe with man is less about a pass and fail grade, but maybe it's just to help challenge you, challenge us, to help us to grow. Right? God seems to have a little bit more compassion. And he gives tests not to hurt us, but to push us. And maybe this test of rules helps us to understand the next set of rules we're about to get when we get to Sinai. Because we have to remember, always putting this in context, where are these people coming from again? They're coming from Egypt. And who was the ruler there? Who was the ruler of Egypt? Pharaoh. Yeah, you guys with me? Pharaoh was their king. Pharaoh was their master. And who was Pharaoh? Was he not a tyrannical monster? This person who beat people, who starved people, who killed people for his own benefit, who forced us to make bricks, who made all of us the same, who pitted us against each other. We are people who are traumatized by a tyrant, and his rules were to benefit him and his kingdom. These people are headed to Sinai, following a new master, a new king. What is this king going to ask of us? Well, if the first test had any indication, maybe that will help us for the next test. How will they start to prepare? How will these new rules that I just received with the manna, how do these rules prepare me for what is about to come? Maybe the fear and the trauma that I lived with under this tyrannical monster my whole life, maybe this leader is different than that. Maybe he's not going to give me a test where I live or die. Maybe he's different. First, we learn how this master heard our cry in Egypt, and he rescued us. Then he heard our cry in the desert, and he fed us. This master seems to listen, to hear, and respond. In Egypt, every day, we gathered bricks. Here, we gather manna. In Egypt, every day we followed rules for his benefit, for him. Here we see we follow rules for our benefit, for us. In Egypt, we had to work every single day, sometimes early morning, sometimes late at night, with all of these things, these conditions put on us. Here, the seventh day, we rest. In Egypt, we were called lazy, worthless, no good. But here, we are royalty. We're children of the new master. These rules we learn from manna were to prepare us for rules that were about to come. Rules about how to live. Like the manna rules, these new rules at Sinai will make us a better people. For our benefit, personally, culturally, and even for an entire society, they will benefit us. There's something with the Sabbath, the Omer, the manna, the bread that came from heaven, which then prepares us for Sinai, which is the words that come from heaven. Matthew 6 says this: no one can serve two masters. Either you hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. How many of us struggle serving two masters? How many of us struggle trying to serve the master of public opinion? The one who I care so much about what other people think about me, that I really have no foundation. That my decisions are based on whether somebody's going to approve or somebody's going to like these things. So I make my decisions based on those. Yeshua says, therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them in practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Do we have conviction to make choices, not based on what people think, but on, God says. I've been struggling with this for a while, and where we are in society, and it consumes a lot of my conversations, but just our culture today, our society today, our youth today, have the highest percentage of anxiety than any culture that has been measured. Suicides for teenagers is through the roof and growing every single year. Could it be because society is serving another master? Could it be because people are living in Egypt and they don't even know it? Or maybe they have chosen to go back to Egypt because that is seemingly better. Yet we look around and wonder why things are the way they are. Yeshua talks about this in John chapter 6, and he actually talks about the story of a man. And I wanted to highlight just a couple things, but I would encourage you to read John 6, 29 and 35. He's arguing with some of the Pharisees about who he is and where he comes from. And he references the manna that comes from heaven. And this is past 6:32. Therefore, Yeshua said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, Moshe did not give you the bread out of the heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread out of the heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down out of the heaven and gives life to the world. John seems to paint Yeshua over and over as the new Moses in this gospel. And as I thought about that passage, I thought about the question, what's the point of Shavuot for us? Why do we need to celebrate Shavuot? Why is that even important to celebrate Shavuot? And one, it's the easy answer is, yeah, we need to remember what God has done for us. Yes, that's the easy answer. That's the basic answer. But two, maybe it's also to recognize that God has given us these words on this mountain to give us life. Sometimes we look at the Bible and we think, oh gosh, I hate to open this up. I mean, it's a lot of reading. Look how many pages there are here. Who wants to read this many pages? I mean, it can be overwhelming. But it's kind of like water. If you don't drink water, what happens? You die. You can go 3 days without this. That's it. And you die. You can go 30 days without bread. And then you die. Yeshua paints the same picture like this. These are the words that give us life. They're not this idea. We get so caught up sometimes in the church, like, oh, we're supposed to get to heaven. It's about like getting to heaven. But all of these words are about how we live here today. The kingdom, in Jesus' words, are not about when you get to death and you die. He says the kingdom is here. It's now. It's present. It's in our midst. It's in our midst. It's right here. But do we consume it? For those who struggle with the idea of being in Egypt, maybe we want to see now. There's a better way to live. And I believe that so many people in our society have forgotten that way. Our job is to study these words and to do these words. There's a neuroscience, Dr. Huberman, that I was listening to. He's talking about this idea of working out and strength and all these other things. He's a neuroscientist. He's talking about exercise. And he said, when you exercise, you have to set a limit. This is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to push myself. And then after pushing yourself, he said you should always reward yourself with something. Not with like cake or pizza, not that. But like have some type of like reward that you think of that like this was a benefit. I should reward myself. And he talked about going on a run on the beach and I said, this is fun. But there's these things that you should reward yourself with. And then he said, repeat. And I was thinking about that for a few weeks after I listened to him talk about that, and I thought, wait a second. Is that what the rhythm of the Bible is all about? There's an effort that we put in. There's an effort that we learn. There's this effort that we learn about these words and we do these words. We learn about these, do these words, and then what do we do for every celebration? We give ourselves a reward. We celebrate. We sing, we dance, we laugh, we eat together, we drink together, we celebrate, we reward. And then what happens after the celebration? We go back to work. And so, as he was talking about this, I thought, isn't this the rhythm of Leviticus 23? Effort, reward, repeat. Effort, reward, repeat. And I thought about that, and I thought, as everything that I've been studying is like, if you want to make change in your life, it's not these big drastic things that happen to you that changes your life. If you really want to change your life, it's the incremental small things that you do that you don't even realize is changing. But you stay disciplined and you keep doing these things and you look back and you think, oh wow, I've come a long ways. 49 days these people walked and they walked and they walked to get to a mountain. They didn't get there instantly. It took them one step at a time. And they kept going. For 40 years they did the same thing. And maybe that's it for us. Maybe it's just this idea that we need to put effort in every single day. And when next week we celebrate, we look back from Passover to Shavuot, have I gotten better? Have I improved? What's changed in my life? And then from Shavuot to the next holiday, we look back and say, what's happened over these past few months? What has changed in me? How have I been affected? Who have I affected? Is there anything different? Because we celebrate those little changes. So maybe that's what this idea of Leviticus 23 is all about, is effort, reward, repeat. It's in the daily changes that we get better and our society gets better. And that's the reward. Isn't it? Father, we just thank you for tonight. And thank you for an opportunity to just hopefully see this celebration that we do every year in a different light. To be able to think about what it means to put effort into a daily routine that gives us small